He saw me but pretended not to. He sent me away with the same coldness as someone closing a door. That night, something inside me broke, and what remained was the need to understand where we lost love amidst the routine. Pain doesn't always come from betrayal. Sometimes it comes from the silence of someone who is still by your side. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Rachel was sitting on the sofa, alone at home on a Thursday night. The television was on, serving only as background noise while she mechanically scrolled through her social media feed. Photos of smiling people on trips, fancy dinners, and perfect family moments passed before her tired eyes. Other people's lives always seemed so vibrant compared to her monotonous routine. Sighing, she checked the time. 9:37 p.m. Daniel, her husband of 6 years, had messaged earlier saying he would be staying late at the office again. It was the third time that week. The nights at the Smith family home were becoming increasingly quieter, with only the occasional sound from Leo, their 4-year-old son, who was already asleep in the next room. The 3-bedroom apartment, which they had bought with so much sacrifice and enthusiasm 2 years ago, now seemed too large, and at the same time, suffocating. A pile of bills awaited on the kitchen table. Leo's school, car payments, overdue condominium fees. Rachel worked as an elementary school teacher, and Daniel was a project manager at a construction company. They weren't poor, but the dreams they nurtured when they were younger seemed increasingly distant. Her phone vibrated, interrupting her thoughts. A message from Patricia, her friend since college. "Friend, I just saw Daniel here at that Italian restaurant we always used to go to. Why don't you come? There's a crowd here." Rachel felt a warmth rise from her neck to her cheeks. Restaurant? Crowd? Her heart raced as she reread the message. Daniel had said he was working on an urgent report. She swallowed hard, trying to control the whirlwind of thoughts invading her mind. "Who is he with?" she typed with trembling fingers. "With some guys from work, I think. They're all laughing. It looks fun. Come on. It's been a while since I've seen you." Rachel hesitated. She could ask the neighbour to stay with Leo for a few hours. But something deeply bothered her. It wasn't just the lie. It was seeing how Daniel seemed to save all his energy and smiles for moments away from her. "I can't, Patricia. Leo is sleeping. But thank you for letting me know." She dropped the phone on the sofa and walked to the apartment window, observing the illuminated city. The reflection in the glass showed a 34-year-old woman, brown hair tied in a messy bun, noticeable dark circles under her eyes, dressed in an old t-shirt and sweatpants. When was the last time she had dressed up to go out? When was the last time Daniel had looked at her with desire? Impulsively, Rachel returned to the bedroom. She opened the closet, picked out a simple but pretty dress that she rarely wore, and looked at herself in the mirror. She then decided she would go, not to make a scene or catch someone in the act, but to understand what was happening with her marriage. To see with her own eyes who the man was that she shared her life with when he wasn't under the weight of domestic responsibilities. She called Rose, the trusted neighbour, to stay with Leo. Within half an hour she was in the car, driving to the restaurant with a lump in her throat and questions hammering in her mind. La Fontana was still the same. Yellowish lights, dark wooden tables, and the aroma of herbs and tomato sauce in the air. Rachel entered trying to seem casual, as if she too was there for a moment of relaxation. Her eyes scanned the room until she located the table where Daniel was seated, surrounded by 4 other men. It was strange how he seemed like a different person. Relaxed shoulders, a genuine laugh escaping his lips as he gestured animatedly. How long had it been since she saw him like that? At home, Daniel always wore a tired expression, offered short answers, an automatic kiss on the forehead before sinking into the sofa or the computer. Rachel took a deep breath and walked toward the table. Patricia, who was sitting at the counter with some friends, waved enthusiastically. When Daniel finally noticed her presence, the smile on his face gradually faded, like a light going out. There was no joyful surprise, nor embarrassment for being caught in a lie. His eyes, usually warm despite the fatigue, now gazed at her with an indifference that made her freeze. He stood up, approaching close enough for only her to hear. "Pretend you didn't see me and go home immediately. You shouldn't be here." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but carried an authority Rachel had never experienced from him before. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Her face burned with shame and indignation. "Why did you lie about working?" she whispered back, aware of the curious glances from his friends. "This is neither the time nor the place for this. Please, Rachel," he replied, maintaining a forced smile for the others. "We'll talk at home." One of Daniel's friends approached, extending his hand to Rachel. "You must be Rachel. Daniel talks a lot about you. Why don't you join us?" Daniel quickly intervened. "Rachel just stopped by to say hi but needs to get back to Leo. Isn't that right, love?" There was something in his eyes, a silent plea she didn't completely understand. Confused and hurt, Rachel forced a smile. "Yes, I just stopped by briefly. I need to get back home." Late at night, she left the restaurant feeling humiliated and invisible. In the car, the tears finally came. What had happened to them? When did they become strangers to each other? Rachel got home without exactly knowing how she had driven the car there. She parked, entered silently, and leaned against the door, feeling her body tremble. She removed her shoes still in the hallway and let the dress fall to the floor, as if she wanted to rid herself of the weight of that night. She slept little. Anger, embarrassment, and doubt mixed into an impossible knot to untie. When Daniel arrived, it was already past midnight. She pretended to sleep, but the sound of the key in the door made her open her eyes. He stopped at the bedroom door, observed her for a few seconds, and then lay down without saying anything. The next morning, Rachel was already awake when he came down for breakfast. The silence between them was thick. She served the coffee as if each movement was calculated. He tried to break the ice. "I can explain." She interrupted him without looking up. "Explain what, Daniel? The fact that you lied to me? Or the way you sent me away in front of your friends as if I were a nuisance?" Daniel sighed, massaging his neck. "I didn't mean to hurt you. That night was important to me. It was an informal meeting with clients, and you thought it was better to hide me," she completed with a firm voice. "Hide me and then humiliate me." He remained silent, staring at the cup. "I was trying to maintain appearances. I didn't want you to think that I was having fun while you stayed home with Leo. So you preferred to treat me as an intruder." Her anger was mixed with sadness. "Do you know what was worse, Daniel?" she continued, her voice choked. "It wasn't seeing you there. It was seeing you laugh. Seeing the man who, at home, is always tired and silent, suddenly light and alive. And to think that maybe the problem was me." He raised his eyes, surprised. "Don't say that." "I have every right to speak," she replied firmly, "because that's how I felt, as if you had stopped recognizing me, and I had also stopped recognizing myself by your side." Daniel remained silent for a few seconds. Then, with a heavy sigh, he said, "I acted wrongly. Completely wrong. There's no excuse for the way I treated you. When I saw you there, I felt ashamed. Not of you, but of myself. Of the life we've been living, of the distance between us. And instead of dealing with it, I pushed you away." Rachel took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. "I needed to hear that." He nodded, his eyes teary. "I should have called you that night, should have invited you to laugh with me. I hid behind work, behind exhaustion, and left you alone." There was a long silence. The noise of the spoon hitting the cup was the only sound between them. "I don't know what to do with this, Daniel," she said finally. "We can't pretend nothing happened." "I don't want you to pretend," he replied, slowly approaching. "I just want you to let me try to do things differently." Rachel looked at him cautiously, not giving in but also not pulling away. "Then start by being honest. and let me feel what I need to feel, because what you did hurt. I know, he murmured, and I'm sorry. She nodded, discreetly wiping away her tears. I hope you really are. The following days were tense. The truth hurt. When did she become this person who could only think of sleeping when she had a free moment? When did the two of them have a moment of relaxation, and she saw him smile like that? The week passed in silence. Daniel seemed even more absent, arriving late, leaving early. Rachel began to observe him differently, noticing how he would open the closet in the morning and spend several seconds staring at the clothes before choosing something, as if none of the options excited him. How he sighed in front of the bills, massaging his temples. How he looked at Leo with infinite love, but also with exhaustion when the boy asked for the 100th time to play. On Sunday night, Rachel found an old box while organizing the closet. Inside, there were small traces of time, movie tickets, carefully folded letters, and a photo of her and Daniel on a beach, laughing with their hair blowing in the wind. They were in their early 20s, and had the kind of hope that only exists when one believes the future will always be better than the present. Next to the memories there was a handwritten list. Plans for the next 10 years. Trips, a child, they had Leo. Buy a house, they got the apartment. Start a garden, they never did. Learn Italian together. They abandoned it in the 3rd month. Go hiking in the mountains. They went only twice. Rachel sat on the bedroom floor, looking at that list as if she were looking at a life that happened and another that was left behind. It was strange to realize how love also became part of the routine, silent, functional, sometimes forgotten. When Daniel entered and saw her there, he didn't need to ask anything. He sat next to her, picked up one of the photos and smiled with a melancholic air. She knew that he remembered too. The simple days, the unpretentious promises, the enthusiasm of those who still believed anything was possible. There was a long silence. Neither wanted to be the first to break it. Until Rachel looked up and found him. The question escaped almost voicelessly. What had happened to them? Daniel took a while to respond. Not for lack of an answer, but because they all hurt. He finally said that perhaps they had been swallowed by routine, by bills, the weight of responsibilities, the need to keep everything running. That sometimes he just wanted to remember that he was still someone besides a husband, father and provider. Rachel listened without interrupting. She understood what he meant, even though it hurt. She also sought escapes. The few minutes of silence while the coffee brewed in the morning, the long showers where she pretended not to hear the voices calling for her. They were small but vital moments like cracks of air in a windowless house. Daniel, with a distant look, confessed that he had felt suffocated at the restaurant. That place was the only space where he disconnected from demands, and seeing her there, he had the feeling that even that would be taken away from him. There was no justification that could erase the humiliation of that night, but there was an explanation that was beginning to make sense. Rachel took a deep breath. She didn't forgive him. Not yet. But something in her softened at the sight of the fragility in him. They were both tired, exhausted from trying to manage everything, to meet expectations, to maintain the appearance of a stable marriage. And when tiredness became the foundation of everything, love began to survive only on autopilot. She leaned her head against the wall, looking at the ceiling. She thought about how they had gotten there, and how perhaps there was still time to go back, if they had the courage to relearn how to breathe together. The next morning, while making coffee, Rachel found a note on the fridge. Can we try again? Dinner, Friday, 7 p.m, just the two of us. Daniel. That week was different. Daniel arrived home earlier every day. They talked, for real, about the little accumulated resentments. How Rachel felt overwhelmed with household chores despite working outside. How Daniel felt that his financial worries weren't understood. How they both missed moments alone, without the pressure of being perfect. On Friday, Rachel left Leo with the grandparents. Instead of a fancy restaurant, Daniel prepared a simple dinner at home. Pasta, cheap wine, old music. "Remember when we did this every week in our first apartment?" he asked, serving the wine in regular glasses. "The tiny apartment where the neighbour played the saxophone at 3 a.m? They laughed, recalling nearly forgotten stories. After dinner they sat on the sofa, closer than they had been in months. "What are we going to do, Daniel?" Rachel asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "How do we fix this?" "Maybe we don't need to fix everything all at once," he replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Maybe we can start with small things. One night a week just for us. Sharing the chores better. Respecting the time we need for ourselves without guilt. And being honest when we're feeling overwhelmed. Yes, especially that." Rachel thought about Daniel's indifferent look at the restaurant. Now she understood better. It wasn't indifference when he saw her, but a desperate reflection of someone trying to protect the only moment of lightness he could find. "Love doesn't die easily, you know," she said, looking at his hand in hers. "It just gets distracted, starts to think that partnership and routine are enough. And aren't they? They're important, of course, but love needs attention, care. When we stop cultivating it, it rusts." Daniel smiled, a genuine smile that she hadn't seen directed at her in a long time. "Then let's unrust it," he said, leaning in to kiss her. 6 months later, Rachel parked in front of the same Italian restaurant. This time she walked in confidently, wearing a red dress she had bought especially for the occasion, Daniel's birthday. He was already there, chatting animatedly with friends. When he saw her, his face lit up. He immediately stood up, pulling out a chair for her. "Guys, you know my wife Rachel," he said proudly. The last few months hadn't been easy. They had had arguments, moments of relapse into the exhausting routine, days of silence. But they also had nights of sincere conversations, reorganizing of priorities, and asked for help when necessary. Rachel looked around the table, at Daniel's friends who were now also hers, at her husband who had once again become her partner, not just her colleague in obligations, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The silent wear had almost eroded what they had, turning love into indifference, passion into routine. But they discovered together that love, when tended with mutual attention and respect for individual needs, could bloom again, even in the most barren routines. Daniel took her hand under the table and smiled, not a tired or forced smile, but that same smile from the photo at the beach, full of possibilities. Rachel smiled back, knowing that the work of maintaining that connection would be daily, but it would be worth every effort. The indifferent gaze of that night had transformed into a lesson and a new beginning. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.